On today's show, Media Day. It's going to be part one of a two-parter. Today we're going to talk about Koby Altman, the offensive evolution, perhaps coming to Cleveland, and much more. Let's dive in.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
The music you heard on the way in is from our friends at Astral Radio. I'm Chris Manning. That is Evan Dammarell. We are the Locked On Cavs podcast. Thanks again to Jake Stevens, as always, for producing, again, two-parter on Media Day. We're going to start by talking about some actual news. There were two big news items to cover at Media Day. You had Koby Altman talking publicly for the first time after his arrest for an OVI, and the body cam footage release. And then we'll talk about Ricky Rubio and the latest with him. We have some more fun topics coming later. And then tomorrow we're going to talk about the Donovan Mitchell extension.
That was the other newsworthy thing to come out of Media Day. But yeah, we'll table that for tomorrow's show.
I think the two things we have at the top are actual, they're not hard news.
It's more current, but yeah. I think, we'll talk about the Mitchell thing, but just him putting a blanket statement out there works for me. Yes. But Koby Altman spoke for the first time publicly since his arrest for an OVI, which happened several weeks ago at this point. Up to this point, it was just either statements there is legal representation or the Cavaliers organization. So I wasn't necessarily surprised he spoke. I think that was the elephant in the room for sure. But I think, at least he had the foresight to apologize and be transparent about it.
Yeah, so I think he was considering the legal situation. I think is transparent to be. So he came out first. Let's set the scene a little bit. So he comes out at the start. Normally at Media Day, it's the opening 30 or so minutes is a Q&A with Koby Altman and JB Bickerstaff, in this case, as the head coach and the president of basketball operations. Koby in this one comes out and he talks solo, gives a statement, said that they've had several conversations across the building with players, coaches, and ownership. He was asked later on in the day, later on in his session, I should say, that he has talked to Dan Gilbert about it. He was sitting for, today for a decent amount of time with Grant Gilbert, or Dan's son, who's very involved in the organization. Said he can't go into any further detail or any questions right now because it is a legal matter. So he said basically, I think, what he's legally
allowed to say.
About to say. I think that I still would say the body cam footage and everything doesn't look particularly good. I'm not calling for him to be fired or anything. I would be curious to see what the higher ups above him that hold, he of the people we heard from today has the most power of anyone in the organization, and you're kind of just taking his word on some of this stuff, and that's just the nature of this business. I'm not even knocking it. I think it's just let's see where this ends up before we, say anything else. Yeah,
don't throw out the baby before you do the bathwater in this situation, but more than that, like you said, he said all he could say. He was very clear that legally speaking, he can't go into great detail, and I think he did ask us to respect his privacy as well, and he was transparent about it. But like you said, he did speak with Dan Gilbert. He was asked what those conversations entailed, and he said he couldn't go into much detail about it. But we'll see how the legal process plays out from this one. Like you said, the body cam footage certainly paints the picture a lot more clearly, because when you see he was arrested for an OVI and just the pretty basic statements Fox 8 got with the Cleveland police saying that he was compliant and friendly and whatever they said, the body cam footage certainly does paint a picture of just what happened that night. And I'm interested to see how this evolves, and I think we won't really have an answer until it's settled in the courts, and then we'll see what the Cavs do, if they do dish out some type of punishment, or just at least maybe just kind of keep an eye on the situation to make sure that if it does happen again, hey, you don't get like multiple strikes, like either you're out or like something more severe comes down.
Yeah, I think thinking about this with him and just thinking about this process, it's definitely a lot of it is wait and see, and I think that's just unfortunately the reality of it. If you're trying to talk about this, like, it is not. Look, I have pretty strong opinions about anyone who gets behind the wheel of a car under any substances. It is one of the things that I feel most strongly about, if I'm being honest.
I mean, it's an incredibly deadly and dangerous thing to do.
Yeah, and I think taking that seriously is just kind of thing that Altman has said at least a little bit, but it is not fair for us or anyone in the media space to at all speculate about this. I like, people have, like, I know, commented and been like, "Can you guys talk about this more?" Whatever. That's not really, like, it's right for us to do.
It's also not our area of expertise. Like, we're not going to sit here and be like legal advice and counsel. And like you said, it's also, I would say it's inappropriate for us to like speculate on this recklessly, because that's so dangerous, because it's a very, and I agree, like, I have zero tolerance for people who get behind the wheel, whether they drink and drive, consume any type of recreational drug and drive, or illegal narcotic and get behind the wheel. Like, get an Uber if you're going to do that, or find somebody to give you a ride home. But yeah, like you said, like, it's messy and dangerous to speculate on it, because we don't know what is being said behind closed doors. We don't know what's being said in these legal proceedings. We don't know X, Y, and Z. And you can't speculate on what you don't know, especially in a topic this sensitive and as severe and dangerous as it is. So, like, you don't want to like speculate on it recklessly, just because we don't know all the facts. We just know what is being told to us through Koby today in his statements, Cleveland police, or just Koby's legal group or legal team.
Yeah, and look, it's also just, I think, like, ethically and like what we know, it's just like there's not much more we can say unless you want to like get yourself in journalism ethics trouble. Ricky, on the Ricky Rubio front, he was not there today. We did not see him.
Still not as positive note, but a different subject entirely. It's hard to segue from that.
That's why you just do it, and now here we are. Rubio, Koby Altman was asked point blank if Rubio was going to retire. He said no. That was the entire answer. Rubio was not present. The team sent out a statement before media day that he was not going to be there. They couldn't really talk about it. It was called by Koby Altman an excused absence, which matters because, unlike, like, say, James Harden in Philadelphia, this is not going to, like, potentially face fines for Rubio or to hurt his free agency in the future, anything like that is on the table if it is an unexcused absence. So, yeah, wait and see with Rubio. We don't know anything more than we did before media day started, is where we are at with this.
Correct. And I think that it should stay that way, because it's none of our business what's going on with Ricky behind the scenes. The Cavaliers did make it clear when they announced that his absence was excused that they will not be taking any questions or commenting further at this time due to respecting Ricky and his family's privacy. And I think that's just the best course of action. Mental health is such a nuanced thing to address and prioritize, and it can be hard. It's ups and downs and hills and valleys, and you have to just give Ricky as much time as he needs to feel like he's ready to come back to the floor. And if he decides to retire, that's a conversation the Cavs will have down the line. But to your point, Koby did say, like, no, it's never come up in discussions they've had with Ricky and his representation, or just Ricky directly. That, like, retirement's never really been like a topic. It's just we'll see where it goes. That's all I can really say.
That's all we literally can say. We will see. And we'll see what this ends up. All right, we're going to move on to more fun topics coming up next. We're going to talk about the offense, what the Cavs are saying about it, what some of the things that we could see are. We're going to talk about that coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time, which is the best way for you to buy tickets at the last minute. Here's for me a time I use them. I was in New York in August. I went to see Liberty Aces. That was a big event. That was an in-demand event. If you go and look at the ticket numbers for that game, it was nuts. What I did was I went on Game Time and I found the best deal possible, and I actually got a bonus from them for using Apple Pay. So I saved even more money by doing that. It was a great experience. Tickets were just right in my phone, connected it to my app. It was easy. You get to see the seat. I got to see my seat before I bought it. So I had a buddy that I went with that was in a walking boot. I got to actually see the row so I could pick out a row where his big boot could fit, and it wasn't going to be a problem. I mean, what other app are you getting that level? They have deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts if you're trying to sneak in after it goes. It is the place to find last-minute seats. You can find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on everything: football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And you can get zone deals where you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. Plus, the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. I used that code as well. It was great. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, and that's guaranteed. All right, we're back. Let's talk about the offense. So, JB Bickerstaff kind of kicked this off by giving an interview to NBA.com a day or so ago, where he talked about motion and he talked about everything he goes. You think about the personnel he added, and I think there's a very clear thing going on here based on what they said and pair that with the moves. Mm-hmm. I think they know they need to score points to win games in a way they didn't last year. I think they are diagnosing their problem, not as much as the toughness thing and stuff that I think does matter, but I think there's a level of offensive competency, offensive ceiling, everything that I think they're hitting at to say, hey, we know we need our offense to be better. We know it needs to evolve. Mm-hmm. It's got to get to a certain place.
Yeah, and Koby Altman kind of hit the nail on the head, and like I heard it as playing 90s style basketball as in like the decade you and I were born in, but more so to your point, and after thinking about it again after you and I talked about it, like the Cavs can win games ugly, but they shouldn't have to. It expends a lot of energy, expends a lot of effort, and also it's harder to do that in the playoffs when things are tighter. You don't have that opportunity to, okay, even though we lost, we still have 81 more games. No, it's a best of 7, but the first of 4 wins in a series. And to your point, like the Altman made it pretty much a point of emphasis to make sure like the Cavs sprinkled in some modernity with Max Strus, George Niang. Ty Jerome didn't get much talking about other than from Karis LeVert of all people, but there's a lot of interesting wrinkles and ways this can develop, and I think it's not just from Koby and JB, it's from all the players too. Like it's all pretty clear, like, hey, we're gonna have a lot more shooting opportunities, we're gonna have a lot more spacing opportunities, and it's gonna make, and I asked Jared, does it make life easier? He said it doesn't make life easier, but it certainly makes the offense a little bit more dynamic and not as stagnant at times. And that's where that JB interview kind of comes to mind, where he said that the Cavs need to start using more motion, more off-ball cutting and off-ball screening. And that's something you and I have been kind of advocating for a while, is the Cavs are kind of one-note sometimes. And adding more depth and wrinkles to your offensive flow could do a lot of good, especially with when you prioritize shooting in the offseason.
I think if you just think about, we'll talk about Evan Mobley in segment 3, because I think he was kind of, as much as we could talk about Strus and we could talk about Niang and even Jerome, right? Like, and talk about the guys they've added and even what Karis LeVert was last year. I think Evan Mobley was kind of the focal point of some of these discussions. There's more to come, obviously, and the offense is going to run through Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Like, it is their offense, and shout out to our friends at the Chasetown for needling some Darius Garland about taking more threes. I love them immensely for doing that. But I think like with this,
should have bribed him with a bento box. No disrespect, it's a cool, very thoughtful gift from Carter's, bringing that from Worlds and for Pokemon Worlds, but you got to bribe him maybe a little bit. Carter's a dad. He knows this. You got to compromise with your kids.
So the I don't even know where we went there.
I don't know either.
Okay, cool. So I think it was the funniest part about this is that, like, I think everyone and their mother knows that Max Strus is going to start. He said that he's going to start.
To you, in one word.
Well, okay, but here, that's not to me. That isn't a communal setting. Press conferences are a communal good. It doesn't matter.
Well, you asked the question, like, do you think you're going to start? And he's like, yes. And
yeah, I just don't. Look, those are a communal good. I don't. Fine. That's not to me. That's just in a group setting. JB was asked about it early, and he's like, "I'm not going to tell you that. Why would I tell you that?" Karis LeVert kind of talked around the fact that he's going to come off the bench, and I think everyone knows it makes sense for him to come off the bench. He just talked about his role being clear to him. I think we very much know that it's like Strus is coming into space and do this, and how they use him, I think, will be a real tell. Because, like, is he going to come off of screens in a way they didn't have, like, Okoro obviously not coming off of screens that way, right? Like, I think there's just a lot to learn through that prism, and then let's see how it impacts the guards. I'm really, this is one of those things that even if they had given us more information than they did, A, they haven't practiced it done yet, and I would expect some growing pains as this goes on. And B, we need to see some games. We need to see preseason games. We need to see some regular season games. We need to see this in person, in real time, to have a better idea of, I think, what this is going to look like, even if we can start projecting a little bit here.
Yeah, and it is a little interesting because he brought up Karis LeVert. LeVert alluded to the fact that, well, one, that he had shoulder surgery. We'll talk about that more in tomorrow's episode. Like, that was a little bit of a surprising note, but, like, that he, as you said, like, adapted his game a lot more to shooting threes and taking way less mid-range shots. And when asked about the spacing, he's like, yeah, it's going to create a lot of opportunities for me to get to the basket and slash more, which is something he was definitely known for in his time with Brooklyn and in his limited time in Indiana. Like, I think we're still seeing, like, the finished product, quote unquote, that is Karis LeVert, but, like, he does kind of get to play his own brand of basketball more than what the Cavs were asking to do last year, just from the advent of adding shooters to their depth chart and rotation. And yeah, to your point, like, just Strus on paper and just in practice just makes so much sense for this lineup. It provides spacing for Mobley and Allen. It's a third option next to Garland and Mitchell at the perimeter. And he's big enough to kind of be multifaceted, whether it's a 2, 3, or 4. And if the Cavs want to go super small, of course. But it'll be fun to see how they evolve from this and add more three-point shooting just to their overall scheme.
Who aside from Mobley do you think will benefit the most from this? This is maybe a whole episode, but is there anyone that comes to mind as you that's really going to benefit from motion and this emphasis on changing the offense?
Mitchell, I think it's going to be a little bit more familiar for him, just because Quinn Snyder utilizes a lot of motion and off-ball screening and cuts, and the Jazz with Quinn Snyder were kind of offensive harmony at times, and like breaking down that footage and having an understanding of like what worked for Mitchell so well and what can that be, how can that be applied to Cleveland. But I think it's going to help Mitchell in terms of the starting five a lot, just because it's going to give him a lot of familiarity, and also just having that extra spacing, or let's say like Mobley and Allen benefit from the spacing and are making defenses pay more attention down low. Like, if you give Donovan Mitchell an ounce of daylight, he'll try to take the shot and likely will make it. But if he has more space and way less pressure to operate with, that's good for you if you're Cleveland, because you're not burning out his motor as quickly, so he can kind of give you that longer juice and run come playoff time.
I'm going to go Garland just because I think he's going to really pair well in that. And I think with Mitchell, if you go back and read some of the Utah stuff, look at some of the numbers, that style of play for them changed over time to be very much the ball is in his hands. I think I think last year was like really kind of taking some of the principles of Utah, even if they didn't have enough shooting, and saying, this is how you played, you were really great at it, let's like acquiesce this to our system. I think Garland getting unleashed into motion, and I think all the role guys, like I think if Okoro just has like more natural cutting, like is it easier for him to find offensive utility when he doesn't just like stand in the corner? I would argue yes, even if he's still going to have to stand in the corner ultimately and hit some threes. All right, let's talk about Evan Mobley coming up right after this. So Evan Mobley was, I think, as quiet as he is, and I'm going to read back a quote that he said because it really made me giggle when he said it. He was asked about his diet a bunch because he like hired a chef and all that stuff, and someone asked him if he... What?
This is when he said he finally had, like, he's finally trying out steak, and I'm like, how do you like your steak? It's like Giannis, like, eating a brat for the first time in 10 years after living in Milwaukee.
Okay, look, Giannis living in Milwaukee for as long as he has not having a bratwurst is an insane thing, and like that's on the Milwaukee Bucks for not doing that.
Listen, I will defend Giannis by simply saying that he discovered Oreos in milk 2 years ago.
I mean, look, I understand his life is different, but, like, it's Milwaukee. You're telling me someone didn't just, like, give him a brat? Like, that guy doesn't eat that. Like, I've seen that man eat chicken wings after games. Like, regardless. Evan Mobley is asked about his diet, like, what if he's cut out anything, and he's just like, nah, mostly ad. And it's like, King, I wish I could just be in the phase of my life, and my job was just, like, you don't have to cut anything out of your diet.
Just
like,
lifting weights.
What are
protein.
macros? What are macros, you know?
Well, Evan and Mobley and I both gained 7 pounds since the start of last season, but his was in muscle. Mine was maybe not as much in muscle, but he did look...
he made me spit up my water, Luke. God bless.
He didn't look... like, it's not like Giannis. Like, Giannis just, like, showed up shredded at one point. Like, just absolutely jacked. Like, just biceps for days kind of thing. Like, or he's not built like Isaac Okoro, but, like... You could tell Evan Mobley filled out his frame a lot more this summer, and you could tell that. I know people like dogged like the notion of him investing in a home gym and everything, and I thought that's what you're gonna say. Is somebody asked him how big his gym was, and he's just like, I don't know, it's big, I guess. It's just got all the stuff I need in it. But either way,
I don't think Mobley's like knows the square footage of his gym, because he's just like, he has a guy that built it, and then like he has another guy who I'm sure is like gonna have that footage in there so he can write it off on his taxes.
Yep. And just more than that, like, but you can like notice like he's still filling out his frame, of course, but like he does look bigger. I'm interested to see, like, in the limited availability media gets to like watch them as they wrap up practice. Like, do we see him actually like trying to defend people, or maybe like do we notice anything different with him on the floor? And then more than that, like when they open up preseason play in Orlando next week, what does he look like out there? Like, does he look stronger and more physical? And I know physical is just such a niche, broad term, but like what does he look like? And I'm curious to see what he looks like.
So he also had this quote that is probably the real headline one about taking more shots and shooting more. And I am now just internally fascinated about what his I already was, but I think what his offensive role looks like is going to be really interesting, because I think like if you think about motion and using him and the way JB Bickerstaff talked about him, it was, you know, he gave this really long quote that was basically like, we want him to score more, we believe in his potential, but he's not someone who has to score more to make an impact on the game, not someone who has to own, like that's the only way he can drive winning, right? I think when I read that, and I read between the lines, I think that means Mobley and DHOs. I think that means Mobley, like maybe being more aggressively going after defensive rebounds to then kick the tempo up and bring the ball up the floor at times to increase the pace of this team a little bit. I think all of that is going to just like naturally give him this bigger feeling, bigger moving offensive role that I think should only benefit him and make him just feel like this bigger growing player. I think like I know I said Darius was my answer for who does that help the most. The answer is like probably just Evan Mobley. It's probably that simple. Yeah.
And so Koby Altman did like kind of make a valid point. Like, he is only 22. It is hard to COVID just made everything feel so long ago, because that was, you know, just like kind of when the Evan Mobley era began. It was just like in the weirdness of like that era of basketball. But like, who knows what he's going to be in 3 years' time? But like the potential is there for him to grow quite a bit. And I chuckle to myself because I just think about how like Tristan Thompson is just like saying, I thought at first Evan Mobley was going to be like a young Chris Bosh, but now I see him as like a young Anthony Davis. And he's like, I tell him all the time, you need to be our Anthony Davis. And to me, one, I think it's good that the Cavs kind of have a veteran big who can maybe get in the face of the two of their more soft-spoken players and kind of just push them a little bit. Like Tristan compared it to Kendrick Perkins pushing him in the playoffs when they had all those runs with Perk. But more than that, saying like, hey, you could be our Anthony Davis is like saying like, hey, Evan, you have the potential to be our best player, whether it's on offense or defense, especially on defense, because like that's what Anthony Davis does a lot for the Lakers. Of course, LeBron is the fulcrum of everything, but like AD does a lot of those small things, especially when he plays the 5, that like really help the Lakers thrive and function. And maybe Tristan sees something that I just didn't, and I'm excited to see what that actually is.
Yeah, I think we are absolutely going to do Evan Mobley's Anthony Davis episode just for the SEO alone. Nick Angstad, if you're listening to this, our channel coordinator, you're welcome that we're going to do that. And Nick, we're going to talk about Tristan on...
Could you have somebody Photoshop a unibrow on Evan Mobley just so we can see the vision?
Please. Don't need to see that. I don't think anyone needs to see that. We are going to talk about... I'm at least going to want to talk about Tristan Thompson tomorrow because like he
was a quote machine.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. He's very
he's
good
at the end of his
career,
and his time at the TV desk certainly gave him the comfort to just say whatever he wants.
Well, he's been doing that as long as I've heard him, so he's just maybe more polished. Yeah,
that's a better way of putting it.
So the last thing I would just say about this is, I think Mobley from day one he came into the league was better off when he got moving, was better off when he was able to not just stand stagnant. And if this is like a guy who's going to get kind of emphasized by that, and whether he shoots corner threes or whatever, I don't care that much. I care more about like, does he get moving? Does he get kind of just flowing in a way that really emphasizes him? Mm-hmm. Can't wait. Can't wait to see what that looks like. It's going to be probably my number one preseason storyline.
It's going to be interesting to see how that evolves. I am curious to see, like, do the Cavs really ignore maybe, I don't want to say bad habits because it worked for them last season, and it's worked for them the season before Donovan Mitchell arrived as well, but, like, how easy is it for them to fall back on what they're comfortable with versus, like, implementing this motion and shooting and screening just to make sure, like, you have the time, space, and energy to actually execute this new vision and ensure that you are setting yourselves best up for success. Because, like, I agree, like, motion and incorporating that is going to make Mobley's life so much more exciting and fun on the court, and it's going to help everyone. It's going to be a good thing for this whole team.
Absolutely is. All right, let's end there. Tomorrow we're going to talk about Donovan Mitchell extension talk. We're going to talk about Tristan Thompson, Max Strus, a whole bunch of other Cavs-related topics we didn't get to here. It's been Locked On Cavs. We'll talk to y'all tomorrow. Thanks again to Jake Stevens, as always.